All right. Hello again. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Well, let's go on. I'm really sorry about this, but okay. So we're recording. I want to begin this evening. Sorry for the few minute delay. I want to say before we say anything else to you, Shalom ol kulchum. That means peace be with you in Syriac. And I'd like to offer an opening prayer in Syriac, which, if you are affiliated with a Maronite parish, you may already know this little prayer. It's called the Trisagion. And I'll say it in Syriac. And those of you who are in a parish may sing it with me, but I won't hear you singing. Anyway, it goes like this. Oh, and Yvette, first posting, please, for the folks.
Sure.
There we are. And you see in the top line here, it's Syriac. And that says Kadishat Aloho, Kadishat Hayeltono, Kadishat Lomoyuto, and then down at the bottom, Itrahamalain. Yeah. So I'm going to sing it. If you want to sing with me, that's up to you. But you'll only hear yourself singing. Kadishat Aloho, Kadishat Hayel Tono, Kadishat Lomo Yuto, Itraham Alain. You see the English translation. Holy are you, O God. Holy are you, O strong one. Holy are you, O immortal one. Have mercy on us. What a beautiful one. Okay, thanks, Yvette. So what I'd like to see at this point is, I had some introductory remarks again. Today's class setting is a kind of stage for our Syriac discussion, which we're going to build to. It's a kind of deductive process from a lot of stuff getting us down to the Syriac churches themselves. I wrote a little note here. It said, be warned from here on out. This class is not for the faint-hearted, especially if you've never had any experience with the Syriac churches. But that's what we're here for, doing our work here. And I would like then, having said that, looking at the biggest grouping. Last week, we talked about the universal church being a communion of churches. And Yvette, we need the second posting right now. All right. Now, this may be familiar to some of you. This may be completely new to you, but we're going to spend a little time with it because this list, which comes from my book on page 90, talks about, you can see, let's follow it from the left side. We have 5 traditions. These are all Eastern traditions. I'm not talking about the Latin Church. That's its own, but we're talking just about the Eastern Catholic churches. And this particular, I want you to just take a few moments to look at this, and then I want to make some comments about it. This, by the way, this diagram is from 1999. So I hope there has been growth in these churches since then, but they're pretty close to what we have. So the first one is the Alexandrian tradition. We're going to talk tonight about the name Alexandrian. Comes from Alexandria in Egypt. These two are the churches, the Catholic churches in Egypt. So we have the Coptic Catholic Church and the Ethiopian Catholic Church. Again, there's so much that can be said about each of these, but simply just so you know word Coptic is actually from the Greek Aiguptus, which means Greek. So, but the Coptic Catholic Church and Ethiopian Church in Egypt. The second, and this is where Maronites will find a home, the Syro-Antiochene tradition, or the West Syriac tradition. And in there are three Eastern Catholic churches: the Syriac Catholic Church, the Maronite Catholic Church, and the Syro-Malankara Church in India. Now, right off the bat, some of you may be surprised that there are Eastern people in Eastern Catholic people and Orthodox people in India. But we'll talk about that later, how these Eastern churches got into India. But you can see, number 4, the Maronite Catholic Church is one of the 3 Antiochene churches that are the West Antiochene Church. And it's centered in the city of Antioch. Okay, the third is the Armenian Church. And I won't speak a lot about the Armenian Catholic Church, but its name tells us where it started and where it is still located with its center. The fourth is the Chaldean tradition, it's the East Syriac, or Church of the East. So we had the West Syriac Church in number 2, and now the East Syriac churches, or the Chaldean churches, are also what's called the Church of the East. We have 2 Catholic Eastern Rite churches, the Chaldean Catholic Church and the Syro-Malabar Catholic Church, also in India. So we have 2 Eastern Rite churches in India, and you see their origins. Now here's the biggest. Let's look at number 5, the Byzantine Church. It's also known as the Constantinopolitan Church. I dare you to say that word 10 times fast and not trip over your tongue. It's obviously from the city of Constantinople. But look how many different churches are under the Byzantine tradition. Okay? There are many, many of them. Maybe some of you know some of these. Some of you also already may know the Melkite Catholic Church. So they're Byzantine, but they speak Middle Eastern languages, but they have a different tradition and history. And I'm not going to go into that now. My only purpose is to show you this diagram, just to tell you how really diverse the Catholic Church is. So with the Latin Church, 22 different churches all bound together in the communion of churches. And as I said last week, all under the guidance of the Bishop of Rome. Okay, so, thanks, Yvette. I'm going to stop just briefly here. If anyone would just like to make an initial but brief observation about that diagram, and I'm kind of looking at, what I'm looking at is are there people here who did not have an idea the church was so diverse? If you would be willing to admit that. Yvette, you can tell them how to raise their hands, and we can unmute them.
Carol, and anyone who would like to speak, please raise your hand in the reactions area. Carol, I'm going to unmute you. I saw your hand.
Yes, when I grew up Roman Catholic and I joined the Maronite Church with Father Don Sawyer, Core Bishop Don Sawyer.
You're good, Pastor Core Bishop. I know him.
1987, but it wasn't until then that I realized, because of a pamphlet that he had prepared, The Best Kept Secret of the and I think that's just what it's called, that there were 22 different rites of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And that's when I first became aware. And so I was an adult, had grown up in the Roman Catholic Church and had no idea.
And I will say this right now, you were not alone. Believe me. But now you're getting educated.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so that's good. Thank you for your comment, Carol. Someone else, I think, has a hand up.
Yes, Kevin, go ahead.
Father Anthony, I'm puzzled that there's so much diversity in the Eastern Church, and it appears to me that the Latin Church is homogenized. And why is that? Why didn't the Latin Church get a lot more different rites in it, as opposed to the Eastern Church?
Yeah, the Eastern churches. Yeah, a really good question, Father Kevin. Thanks for it. So the first thing I need to say is the Latin Church is the big fish. We kind of all swim around in the atmosphere of that because they're the largest. But the Eastern churches have been around from the time of Jesus and the apostles. There's a really good question. There's a lot of answers to that. But the thing I would say is this. When the church moved out of Jerusalem, okay, at the very beginning, when we read in Acts, etc., they went into different countries around the Mediterranean, and even they went into India. We already saw that in the diagram. And when they did that, they adopted the vernaculars and the customs and the cultures of those different countries. Now, did that happen in the Latin Church? Yes, it did. But remember, again, I'm telling you, it's a good question, but they had the backing. Let's think of it this way. When Christopher Columbus went out to discover the world, he brought with him the Latin tradition, and that spread out over, whereas in the Middle East, there were smaller groupings, okay, but they remained important, but they didn't have the expansion that happened in the Latin Church. So the Latin Church became the biggest church. However, once again, we see the diversity in the Eastern churches. Now, what else I want to say without taking too much time for here, because we have a lot in this program today, there was diversity even in the Latin Church. And I know some of the priests and the liturgists who are on this particular Zoom today realize that there were different rites even in the Latin Church. Let me name a couple of them. The Gallican rite in France, the Ambrosian rite in Italy, St. Ambrose, etc. So you see, there was that kind of adaptation to the local churches too, but it wasn't as diverse as it was in the Eastern churches. I know this is kind of confusing, but Kevin, does that help to explain? Oh, okay, good. Okay. I mean, believe me, you can just believe me, this is very complex, but if you look at the bibliography, you don't have to do it now, it's not posted, but if you look at the first entry on the bibliography, there's a very nice new book by a man who has a Greek name and a man who has an English name. And it's a new book published by Liturgical Press, and it's called Introduction to the Eastern Catholic Churches. To the liturgies of the Eastern Catholic Churches. It is just a marvelous work. It's long overdue, but the authors have examined the liturgies of the different Eastern churches and done a wonderful job in giving us a lot of information. I would say to you, if you're still interested in this in general, that's a book you might pick up from Liturgical Press. Okay, can we move on?
We did have one more question
Oh,
in
I'm
the chat.
sorry. Go ahead.
How fixed or fluid is the list of churches? Question by Joe.
Yeah, that again is a very good question. Um, it is pretty fixed, okay? Sometimes some of the smaller Eastern communities, I'm thinking of in Eastern Europe, that don't have their own hierarchy yet, and they might be a little bit too small to be formed into a separate church. There are a couple of them, and some people speak of 23 Eastern Catholic churches rather than, 22 rather than 21. But the list is pretty fixed in what we saw. I'm hearing noises. I'm hoping it's not my brain. All good. All right. Anything else? Good questions. Oh, yes, Mark. Mhm.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
If you could just quickly comment on when it's appropriate to refer to the Maronite Church and others as churches rather than rites and vice versa.
Yep.
Because I have read on this and I have talked with people, and it seems there are just plain differing opinions on when
That's correct.
it's appropriate.
And of course, that's a wonderful question. And of course, I have the correct answer.
Great. I'm glad I'm here.
Before Vatican II, we said this last week too. Before Vatican II, the idea in the Latin Church was that the Eastern Catholic churches were just variants of the Roman liturgy and the Roman rite. But it took a document from Vatican II on the Eastern Catholic churches to help clarify that. And so it became very clear right after the council, and we now live with this, that here's how it works. We belong to churches and we use rites. Does that make some sense? We belong to churches and we use rites. So it is incorrect to say I belong to the Maronite rite. I belong to the Melkite rite. I use the Maronite rite. I use the Melkite rite. I use the Ruthenian rite. So that really, that really is the correct answer. And if you say I belong to a rite, you're minimizing the whole idea that the Eastern Catholic churches are churches equal to the Latin Church, okay, with their own hierarchies and everything else. So with a rite, it's what we use to pray. We bless water with that. We et cetera, with rites, but we belong to churches. Okay, Mark? Okay, anybody else, please? That was a really good question. Okay, shall we move on? No more? Okay. Okay, now, when we talk about the communion of churches, I want to use a word that many of you are already familiar with, but it's important for me to say it. When we talk about the structure of the church, as well as theology and et cetera, we're talking, especially the structure, we use the word ecclesiology, okay? The study of the church. Okay, so when I'm talking about how the church is made up, et cetera, we're talking about the ecclesiology of the church. Now, it's not only which churches make it up, but who governs them, et cetera, who governs the whole church, who governs an individual church, et cetera. Ecclesiology is very important. If you want to on your own, Google that, because you'll find a lot more. We don't have time to go into that, but it's an important word. Okay, and we can go on. All right, now, Yvette, now we need to go to posting number 3. I want to tell you again, brothers and sisters, we have to do all of this work to understand ourselves and our position, so that when we can focus down to the Maronite Catholic Church. But what we're seeing now is what all of us are in the Catholic now on this page and Orthodox churches. I don't know if Tim is with us this evening, Tim O'Malley. Tim, are you there or not? I don't see him. Okay. He mentioned this last week. This is an important diagram that we need to look at because I need to tell you, all of the Eastern Catholic churches come from Orthodox churches. That may shock some of you, but I want to explain that. Except for one church, can someone find it for me? One church that does not come from the Eastern, who's using your cursor there? Or did I do that? Oh, yes. Whoever you are,
I'm using it.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
That is correct. The Maronite Catholic Church claims it never broke away from Rome, okay, from Byzantium, really, which was Rome. We're coming to that. Okay, all the other churches broke away at some time and called themselves generally Orthodox churches. Through the centuries, because of their own reasons, okay, many of them wanted to come back into communion with Rome, and those that did formed the Eastern Catholic churches. Now let's look at this diagram. You can see what I mean. For example, let's just take the first one, in the Alexandrian tradition, the Coptic and Greek Orthodox Church in Alexandria. When those Orthodox Christians, some of them, wanted to come back into communion with the Catholic Church centered at the Vatican, ultimately, the Coptic Catholic Church was formed. Same thing with everybody else, Ethiopian Orthodox, Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church. Do you get the point? Or is this totally confusing? Okay. Anybody? This is very hard for some people to grasp, especially because they don't see the relationship between the Orthodox churches and the Eastern Catholic churches. But because there was a split there, let me back up. I need to say this as well. In the history of the church in the East, the West has its own problems with a schism. In the East, there were two times when the fabric of the Catholic Church was torn. The first time was in the 4th and 5th century over the heresies like Arianism, Nestorianism. You can look at these for yourself. They were basically centered in Syria and Egypt. But in the 11th century, the biggest split occurred between the church in Constantinople and the church in Rome. And they couldn't talk to each other. They actually, sadly, excommunicated each other. And so it becomes a very, very sad history. But so we see that split between the two big centers of Rome. We're going to come to Rome and Constantinople. We'll come to it. But once again, you need to know what the splits that they happened and the consequences. All right. I have something from John. So is it correct to say that the Eastern Catholic churches did not exist after the Great Schism? No, it's not correct to say that. We did exist, but we existed as Catholic. I know that sounds funny in a way, but let's take any one of them. So you had the church in these different countries that were adhering to Catholic teaching. okay, but had their own cultural background, languages, etc. Okay, but then there was a big rupture between that. And so some of those churches said, we want to separate from Rome. We kept our traditions, et cetera, but doctrinally, they said, we know the truth. We are Orthodox. So yeah, the Catholic Church existed in its diversity, but then because of breaking away, John, does that make any sense? I guess you need to unmute if you want to comment. Did you want to comment, John, or?
There you go.
Thanks, Father Tony. Yeah, it makes sense. I was just, since you started out by saying that the Eastern Catholic churches came from the Eastern Orthodox churches, except for the Maronites, that was the reason for my question.
Yeah, yes. So that was what we really need to wrap our heads around, is the difficulty of the basic centers in Christianity not being able to talk to one another. Okay, so only the Maronite Church can say, we always stayed Catholic. That's our claim. But the other churches, and why can I say this? Because when you can see from that diagram that you have in all of those, that long list, you have Eastern Catholic churches and, oh, thank you, Yvette. You can see there's Eastern Orthodox churches and Eastern Catholic churches. But those Catholic churches came back into communion at different times of history. Okay, so I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. And it's so sad what happened, but schisms happen, but also healings happen as well. Reconciliations happen as well. And so this happened here. Now, I could say a lot more on this, but I'm going to say this to you. The Eastern Orthodox don't always love what happened to their people who went back to Rome. In fact, sometimes they, maybe persecuted is a strong word, but they did not like that, because the Orthodox Church wanted to say, we're the oldest church. We are the ones from the beginning. But from the beginning, we were all Catholic. So again, I tell you, this is very complex. We could take it up later if it's not clear, but I think this diagram speaks for itself. Does it? Are we still confused? I like John's questions, but anybody else? Are we getting the point? Okay. Let me give you a really good practical current point. I do not want to get into politics, but let's think of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine right now. Okay? Politically, two different countries fighting for independence, I mean, especially the Ukrainians. But religiously, they are both Orthodox. It's Orthodox fighting Orthodox. You know, so sad. And we don't see it in those terms. We see it in political terms. But actually, you know, the Ukrainians had their own tradition, Orthodox tradition. The Russians had their own Russian Orthodox tradition, but they were Orthodox, and they're fighting and killing each other. It's so sad to look at it in that way. But does that help, or? Okay, well, I could give you other examples, but I really would like to move on. All right. So I want to talk to you. We need posting number 4, please, Yvette. All right. Now, this is a rather large quote, but I thought it might be helpful to read it to see how after Vatican II, the looked at the Eastern Catholic churches in a much better way. Now I got to try to get, I'm not seeing, oh yeah, here, I can get it from this one. I wanted to read it from my original sheet here. Okay. All right. Yvette, how can I minimize the gallery here so I can read it? Oh, I got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So here's what the document from the Eastern churches said about the Eastern Catholic churches. History, tradition, and abundant ecclesiastical institutions bear outstanding witness to the great merit owing to the Eastern churches by the universal church. And by Eastern churches, they mean Eastern Catholic churches. The Sacred Council, therefore, not only accords to this ecclesiastical and spiritual heritage the high regard, which is its due and rightful praise, nice words, but also unhesitatingly looks on it as the heritage of the universal church. John, I go back to that. Before the split, we were the universal church. For this reason, it solemnly declares that the churches of the East, as much as those of the West, have a full right and are in duty bound to rule themselves, each in accordance with its own established disciplines, since all these are praiseworthy by reason of their venerable antiquity, more harmonious with the character of their faithful, and more suited to the promotion of the good of souls. I mean, wow, there's a lot packed into that. Can we minimize that, please? Yeah. So are we still there? Or are we lost? Any comments? I usually don't do this as we go along, but this bears comments if you have them, because it's a big learning process. Anybody? Any hands up?
No hands raised at this time.
Okay, so this document is saying the Eastern Catholic churches are legitimate, they're valid, and they have, because of many, many things, the right to govern themselves. Okay, let me give you a very good example from my church, the Maronite Church, but this is true of the other churches as well. Yvette, can we get number 2 up again real quickly so I can make this point? I think that's the one I want. Yeah, there we go. Let's look at the middle column there and look at the churches listed. These are all Eastern Catholic churches, and look at the ones with crosses after each of them. Yeah, thank you. Are you doing that, Yvette? Thank you. There we go. Now let's look at the top, what that cross means. That denotes that there's a patriarch as head of that church. Okay. Okay, Yvette, you can get rid of it now. Thanks. So that means, for example, as the quote said to us, these Eastern Catholic churches have the right to exist. They have a right to live their own life and to work hard in their own way to promote the gospel. Really important. Now, so I'll speak about my own church. My own church, the Maronite Church, has a patriarch. He lives in Lebanon. He is elected by the bishops whenever the other one dies, or now we have to say resigns, because we had a patriarch that resigned. Everybody got their bustle and a bunch when Benedict resigned, but it wasn't the first time the head of the church ever resigned. And of course, we know even in the West, 500 years before that. So they elect one of their bishops to be the patriarch of their church, and he has the right to govern all Maronites in the world. Okay. Now, I know this is oversimplifying, but I need to put it to you in this way. It means that under the protection and guidance of our patriarch, we can govern ourselves unless we can't do it. Then the man in white can jump in because he is the head bishop of the church. But it's been the wish of at least 5 popes to say, we want them to govern themselves. It's really important. I could go into another thing by saying what happens when an Eastern church does not have a patriarch. But each of them, I will say this, even if it's not a patriarch, each Catholic church has a leader to help govern its church, whether he's called patriarch or not. Okay, but officially and formally, you saw from that diagram, there are 6 or 7 churches that have a patriarch. We are one of them. Melkites are another one, etc. So are we okay there? Are we doing okay? So I just need to ask you, first of all, even those of you who are not Maronites, to please pray for the patriarch of the Maronite Catholic Church, because he's got one of the most difficult jobs in the whole world, living in Lebanon and what's going on in the Middle East right now, and especially in that tiny country of Lebanon, everything that's going on there. But that's also true of other places in the world as well. The patriarchs of the churches, or the heads of their particular Eastern Rite churches, have a tremendous big job to govern their faithful, sometimes even just to preserve their lives. That's kind of a little preachy at the end, but I mean it. Okay, shall we go? All right, no other questions? All right, I think I need to show you another thing. Yes, we did that. They're autonomous. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention a very important document that Pope John Paul II issued when he was the Pope. And it has a Latin name, like many of the documents out of Rome do, most. It was called Orientale Lumen. If you want to, I didn't post it, but it's like the word Oriental with an E on the end, and lumen, you know what a lumen is, light. It means Eastern light, or light of the East. And this document, it's marvelous. If you ever want to learn a lot of what I'm saying today, read this document. It's a document written by the Bishop of Rome to the Latin Rite people. And basically it says they have all these traditions and they're long-standing and they're honorable. You ought to get to know them. Okay, so it's written to Latins about Easterns. Orientale Lumen. Okay, now.
It's in the chat.
Pardon.
For-
I'm sorry. Pardon.
I put the document in the chat as well as the Vatican link for anyone who would like
God
to
bless
download
you.
it.
Okay, so you can download that if you want. The whole thing, or just the name?
Oh, the whole thing.
Wow, beautiful. All right, I now want to talk to a next point, which relates to the diagram that I showed you between the Orthodox and the Catholics. And that is to say, we ought to think about the ecumenical aspect of the Eastern Catholic churches. What can they do in the whole universal church to foster ecumenism, especially with the Orthodox? Okay, and John Paul II, by the way, I'm going to repeat this again. I think I said it maybe in the first one. You know, John Paul II's mom was Byzantine. Does that say something to you? Does that help you know that he was disposed to the Eastern Catholic churches? But he was also a brilliant man, and he was really a wonderful governor of the church in so many areas. So he said, and Vatican II said this, and he just wanted to affirm it, that the Eastern Catholic churches have some kind of really important mission to work towards the reconciliation of churches. And he wrote a document, again in Latin, I'll say it, and maybe Yvette, you will post it for us. Ut unum sint. Ut unum sint. Those are Latin words for, and it comes from the Gospel, John chapter 17. Father, may all be one as you and I are one. So ut unum sint means may they all be one. So, okay. Oh, good. Yep, Yvette, you posted that. That is well worth your reading, let me tell you, because we are living in the day of ecumenism. All right. I'm giving you a lot of stuff to think about and to read, but that's what this is all about. Okay. I want to move on to the next. Now we're beginning to narrow ourselves. Any other questions about the Universal Church, the relationship of the Catholic churches and the Orthodox churches before we move on? Good. Okay. Now let's, Yvette, got a lot of graphics for this one. Number 6. Okay. Yeah. All right. This has that word in it that I told you you must never use anymore. And the word is uniate. That's the way the Latin Church used to think about how it needs to bring back the Orthodox in communion to the Catholic Church. We do not use this word anymore because it had so much negative connotation. But let me read it. It's really good. The council recognized that a high price was paid by the Eastern Catholic churches in terms of Latinization done, sorry. Thus, the council directed that the process of coming into communion of the churches needs to be done differently in these days of ecumenism that had previously been done, and that the terms uniatism and uniate must never again be used. We now speak of reestablishing communion. Do you see the difference? It's a very big difference. This attitude has strongly been endorsed by Pope John Paul II in messages to Catholics, as well as in dialogue with the Orthodox, particularly in Freising, Germany in 1990, Aricia, Italy, 1991, and the most recent 1993 meeting for this purpose at Balamand, Lebanon, documented in the Balamand Statement. Now, I need to tell you, there have been other statements since then, but this is the classic one from the council. So you see, even that early, the Vatican Council was talking about the communion of churches and how we can try to become more and more reconciled. Okay, thanks, Yvette. All right. Okay, now let's go to, I think, number 6. Yep, posting number 6. All right, we're beginning to kind of narrow things down. I want you to look at this map for a moment. As you see, this is at the bottom left, the world of the 4th century church. Remember that by the 300s, the church had traveled outside of Jerusalem and was all around the Mediterranean and actually expanded into India. But I wanted you to see in this map several very important cities. To the far left, the city of Rome. Nearer to the middle, Constantinople. which the original Greek name was Byzantium, or in Greek, Byzantion. There's a reason why Constantine chose that, by the way. Chalcedon across the bay. Okay, let's go down around to the right of it. Antioch, the third, I'm going to come back to this again. Antioch, which was the third largest city at one time in the Roman Empire. You see also Edessa, I'll come to that. You see where Armenia is, John and others. This is what I mean by the diversity of the church. The church went into these different countries and took on their cultural and linguistic heritage. Okay, let's trace down the eastern end of the Mediterranean. We see Syria. Excuse me. Remember, this is the 4th century church. At this time, we do not have the modern day Republic of Syria, okay? And we don't see the Republic of Lebanon because they didn't exist as modern day countries yet. But we do have Mount Lebanon. And I have had the, and of course, Core Bishop, excuse me, Core Bishop Charbel and Father Emmanuel come from this area. They know Mount Lebanon, and Lebanon would take its name from that, but that's where that mountain range exists. Then let's go below that, Jerusalem, where it all started from, Acts of the Apostles. And then finally, let's turn to the left or east to west, the capital of Egypt, Alexandria. So you see that, you know, that on the diagram where we saw all the different traditions of the Eastern Catholic churches, you see that they were centered in these big centers, and that's really important. Okay, thanks, Yvette. Oh, wait, well, yes, any comments? Okay, I'm sure many of you have seen that particular map, and you've seen those cities. Important for us to situate them around the Mediterranean. Okay. That's the 4th century Eastern Christian world. Okay. Now, I want to talk to you what I call in my presentation tonight, an interlude. And I want to talk to you about two Romes. You saw 2 big centers in that last map. In the west, in Italy, it was the old Rome. Any of you who know the history of Christianity know that the Emperor Constantine was a great military strategist, and he defeated a number of people to become the sole emperor of Rome. And because he needed to have a center that was closer in the east, because the empire was much too big, couldn't be governed from one center. So he established Roma Nova, which is the Latin words for New Rome, New Rome. And just like Alexander before him, who named the city after himself. When you were the head guy, you could do that. He named the second Rome Constantinople, the city of Constantine. But it was also known as Roma Nova, and it was in fact the capital of the Eastern Empire. Now, I know a lot of you know that already, but you kind of have to see how that played out. So, we then could speak about the Western Roman Empire centered in Italy and the Eastern Roman Empire, remember I'm saying it's still the Roman Empire, centered in the East at Byzantion, or now Constantinople. Are we okay so far? We're talking about 2 different places. Yes? Good? I told you, hold on to your seats because we're doing a lot of history and a lot of stuff, but we need to know this. Okay, good. I want to talk to you about a man who preceded Constantinople, and that man was Alexander the Great. The reason I had to talk to him about it is because he unified much of the world before the Romans did. And he was a great, great general and an amazing man, Alexander the Great. There are two things I want to point out. I already pointed out one of them, and that is his capital was Alexandria, Egypt, which was Greek. Yes, there certainly was an Egyptian culture, and we know the stories of the Ptolemies in Egypt and Cleopatra, but they were really dominated by Greek culture. And here's what Alexander left behind in the world. It's called Hellenism. Hellenism. So Hellenism. Hellenism. Hellenism is nothing more than saying thinking, speaking, being Greek. That was the aim of Alexander the Great. He wanted to make the world Greek. Okay, so he pretty much succeeded even to taking it into India. So that's really important for us to say, because the background that the Romans inherited, okay, and I was talking about Constantine creating the new capital. It was basically Greek because Alexander had made it so. Did people in the Roman Empire speak Latin? Yes, but they also spoke many other languages too. But the overarching cultural and political language, if you went in to do a civil service job, you had to fill out the forms in Greek. Think of this in another way. Think of the story of Jesus on the cross. Remember what Pilate does? He puts a placard at the top of Christ's cross. And what did he do? He put it in 3 languages: Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, because it was a very cosmopolitan place and people knew it. And I won't go into what INRI means. It's Latin, but that's not part of this. I also want to say, because then I'm going to leave this business of the interlude of Constantinople, but I just need to tell you, there is a book that is not on the bibliography. I'm not sure if I even should recommend it to you. It took me almost a year to read, but I want to say the name of it. It's simply called Byzantium, the Imperial Centuries, 610 to 1410. And that's the tracing of the Byzantine Empire. Okay. You know, sometimes people talk about Byzantine politics. You know, our country has nothing on politics, let me tell you, or no other country either. Byzantine politics. You read through this thing, it just, you just can't keep track of it. It's very, very complex. The book is written by Romilly, I'm going to spell his name, Romilly Jenkins. Romilly, Romilly Jenkins, Romilly Jenkins. Byzantium, the Imperial Centuries, 610 to, I'm sorry, I gave the dates, 610 to 1071. Again, if you look that up, you'll see the full title. It's like, I made another note, everything you wanted to ask about the Byzantine Empire, but we're afraid to ask. Believe me, after reading that book, you'll see why. All right. Now, why do I bring up Constantinople? Two reasons. First of all, that was the empire. Everybody else existed in that empire, including Syria. We really sometimes forget that the overarching political system was Byzantine, ruled from Constantinople. Does that mean everybody was in it was Byzantine? No. We will see, especially in our journey with Syria and the Syrian church, which became the Syriac church, okay, some of those peoples really wanted to be stubborn and cling on to their culture. And that was true of us too. But here's the other thing that's really important. Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire, the further east it got, it was clashing with Persia. And it's important for us to understand this, especially when we'll see some of the people in our tradition, what they were dealing with. But even before that, even at the time of Pompey and Caesar and Antony, they were trying to trying to represent Rome, were trying to defeat Persia. Ultimately, they did, but they had a heck of a time. I got to be careful doing it. Unbelievable. So Constantinople and Persia were always at it for a long, long time. They were enemies. And it had consequences for East and West Syria. Okay, I'll get into it later, but I just wanted you to see the importance of Constantinople and the eastern part of it, especially Syria, Persia, etc. We'll come back to it. All right. I would like to go a little bit more if people are open to this. Yvette, posting number 7. We're narrowing our view now again. That's 7. Yes, it is. Oh, sorry. It looks so similar to the other one. How could I doubt you, Yvette? Okay, I listed all of these. Now, this map basically starts on the left with Constantinople. So now we're talking about the Eastern Roman Empire. Just take a look at this map for a moment. You'll see some of the things we had on the previous map, plus. This is the Syriac world of the 4th century church. The other was just the general Eastern world. This is the Syriac world. Let's take a moment to look at it. So if we go south from Constantinople, we get into Cappadocia or Cappadocia. Yeah, thank you, Yvette. When I took a trip to Turkey, we visited Cappadocia. What a fascinating country. And Christianity was there very early. Keep going around to Mopsuestia, another word you should say 10 times fast. Oh, why did I get a, okay. I don't know why I got, oh, okay, there we go. Just below that, Cyrus, or sometimes Seir. We're going to talk about a famous bishop, Theodoret, who came from Seir. Now south, Antioch, very important for us, capital of one of the provinces of Eastern Syrian Rome. Keep following down, Apamea, Mount Lebanon. Okay, so we saw some of those before. Now we're going to stop there and we're going to turn east and north. We're going to go to 3 different cities that we need to talk about. Okay, Edessa, Nisibis, and let's go downriver to Seleucia Ctesiphon. Another one of those things, say it 10 times fast. Very, very important in the history of the Syriac church. So I would like to turn to those right now. And we can, yeah, you can keep it up, I guess, there, Yvette. I want to start with Antioch. Christine Kondolian, pretty famous American Greek speaker and teacher, organized a wonderful exhibit in Cleveland when I was a young priest on Antioch. And her book is on the bibliography. It is so gorgeous. Antioch, the third largest city of the Roman Empire at one time, very decadent. I mean, if you wanted to go somewhere and have a good time in the East, there were a number of places, but you would go to Antioch. If you were in the West, you'd go down to Pompeii, but that's another story. But Antioch was the capital. So what did Rome do? Rome divided Syria into 3 provinces: primum, secundum, tertium. And Syria Secunda, yes, there's a question here. Can we get the bibliography mailed to us, please? Most of you already have it, but Yvette, can they download it from this?
Yes, I actually put it in the chat at the beginning.
Oh, okay. It's okay, whoever asked that question. Yeah. So download that, please print out that bibliography, and we will continue with it. Okay. So Antioch was in Syria Secunda. It was this capital of the second province of Syria. It was multicultural, multilingual. People in Antioch spoke Greek, they spoke Syriac, they spoke other languages too. The writers in Antioch were basically Greek-speaking writers, okay? We will see there were some Syriac speakers and writers there too, but for the most part, the writings are in Greek. Let me name some of the fathers and teachers of the Antiochian tradition. Theodoret of Syr, I said that before. John Chrysostom. Those of you who, like me, went to Mass today at the local Roman Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church celebrated John Chrysostom today. I thought, woohoo, that was pretty cool being there on that day. So the West celebrated him today, not us. We have him on a different day on our calendar. Ignatius of Antioch, very famous bishop of Antioch, who made his way to Rome to be martyred. And along the way, he wrote many letters to Christians to encourage them and also to teach. And Theodore of Mopsuestia, again, very, very important. So, by the way, let's go back to John Chrysostom for a moment. John Chrysostom was born a Syrian man, and he became a bishop in Syria, but then his fame was so great, he was called to Constantinople to become the patriarch there. And if you really want to read the story of an interesting man, again, not on your bibliography, but there's a wonderful book called Golden Mouth, M-O-U-T-H, by J.N.D. Kelly, K-E-L-L-E-Y, J.N.D. Kelly. Wonderful book. John Chrysostom is to this day still considered one of the most brilliant preachers of the gospel that the church ever produced. But anyway, he ended up being a patriarch in Constantinople, and because he had the chutzpah to challenge the king and queen, the emperor and his wife. They exiled him from Constantinople, and he died in exile. Anyway, just okay. Now, any questions on Antioch? So much we could say. Shall I move on? Okay, no hands. Okay, good. Nisibis and Edessa. You saw on the map where they are. Yvette, can we see that again, please? Okay, in Mesopotamia, in the Fertile Crescent. You see where they are up there? Okay, thanks, Yvette. So they were both early in Christian history, early Christian centers. Ephraim was from Nisibis. He was born in Nisibis. He taught in Nisibis. He preached in Nisibis. As a deacon, he served in Nisibis. And, excuse me, pardon me, getting over a cold. Very famous. The other is Edessa. And we will talk in the next one, Seleucia Ctesiphon, about the man who founded Edessa. But I made the comment earlier that Rome and Constantinople and Persia were always at each other's throats, literally. And many times people living in the between the rivers and in Persia there had to escape from persecution for their lives. Does that sound somewhat familiar today? What's happening today all over the world, sadly. So Ephraim too ended up in Edessa, and he died in Edessa. But he founded schools of biblical interpretation, which we'll look at in another class there, and it's important. There's an interesting legend, and I don't know of any reputable person today that says this is historic, but it actually happened. But there is a legendary story that the then ruler in Syria named Abgar fell sick, and he sent people to Jerusalem to Jesus and said, "Please cure me." So the legend goes, Jesus sent a cloth that was touched to him, and they sent it back to Abgar. They put it on Abgar's body, and he recovered. It is a legend, but what does the legend make us think? That there probably was Christianity at that area very early. The other thing that's very important, well, no, let's leave it at that. Nisibis and Edessa. We will see much more when we talk about the Syriac fathers. Questions? Can we go on? Or hands? Okay. Okay. All right. Now I want to turn to an interesting thing. Yvette, let's go back up again to that map. Down to Seleucia Ctesiphon. This map is not exactly right. It's an old map. When Alexander died, he divided up the empire, the Alexandrian Hellenistic Empire, to his successors. And one of them was Seleucus, in Greek, Seleucos. And he founded the city of Seleucia. But as you see on the map, it's on the wrong side of the river. It should be on the other side of the Tigris River. And the other city, which was founded by the Parthians, Ctesiphon. But the reason that I like, it's today called Zeugma. Zeugma. I want to come back to it in a moment. But the reason I like Seleucia Ctesiphon is because here are two cities on either side of a major river. Can you think of anyone anywhere else that might be true? Those of us from the Twin Cities know about that. It's a little joke, and you may laugh if you want. But it was situated on both sides of the Tigris River. So anyway, the reason it's important is because through time, Seleucia Ctesiphon, which is now today in central Iraq, became a very, very important area in Syriac Christianity. So Edessa and Nisibeth and Seleucia Ctesiphon were very, very important. Archbishops and stuff like that, people like that, that were important in the church, their diocese or eparchy was centered there. So we need to see that Christianity was very early in the area, and it had some important cities. I want to say a couple of things. Let's see. I want to talk real briefly about the religion that was in this area before Christianity came to it, and it was Zoroastrianism. Some of you have heard about that. The founder was Zoroaster, and there's another pronunciation which some of you might have heard about musically, Zarathustra. Thus sprach Zarathustra, a very famous classical work. Zoroaster. It was a dualistic religion, good and evil, good and bad, et cetera, but it also, like other religions, said in the end, evil will triumph. And it seems like there were influences on other religions, but that's what Christianity, partly what Christianity had overcome in the area, Zoroastrianism. There was a very famous council, you can read about it, the Council of Seleucia Ctesiphon. I got to admit something to you. When I first started studying about this area, this city on both sides of the river was not as important to me as it is now because I know some of the history. What else is it important for? Because of the Council of Seleucia Ctesiphon, it's responsible because it agreed with the teachings of the council. It's the origin of the Church of the East. We saw that on our diagram. And also what is called the Thomas Christians in India. I meant to say in India. Church of the East. It's in the Middle East, but also as it moved into India, we find Thomas Christians in India and also the Church of the East. So that's all I wanted to say more, but I don't have time. But you get the point, I hope. All right. Now, I'm going to say just a few things about character. Let's see. I think we've heard enough for tonight. We've heard almost an hour and a half. The next thing we'll look at next week, the next section is called Some Characteristics of the Syriac Tradition and Culture. Okay, and so you'll find it, I hope, stimulating. All right, I want to stop here and offer you the opportunity to ask some questions. Unless it's been all crystal clear, or it's been as clear as mud. You can do a chat, you can raise your hands.
Go ahead, Tony.
Tony.
You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, so a quick question. How did the Crusader states impact the early Christianity and the Eastern churches?
Okay, interesting question. We can't even talk about the Crusaders at this point. It's too late in history. We're talking about very early Christianity. Did they impact the Middle East and Christianity later on? By all means. And Lebanon was one of the countries that was impacted by the Crusades too, but it doesn't apply to the class we're doing now. Anybody else?
Hey, Father Tony, John
Yeah.
Corey here. I had a question about
Sure.
the earlier discussion about the Eastern churches that have patriarchs. So I'm familiar with our patriarch, the Maronite patriarch.
Yep.
I know he's a member of the College of Cardinals. So are the other Eastern patriarchs also
Not
members
all.
of?
Not
What's
not
that?
all.
Not all. Okay.
But in our years and recent years, the popes have been creating them as cardinals. And as you know, if they're under the requisite age, there's an age limit, they too can help elect the next pope. But not all are cardinals. I can stand corrected on that, but as far as I know, I don't think all of them are. What else? There was another one. Tony, did you have a question somewhere? There was a Tony. Okay, well, I guess not.
Yeah,
We do have a
Father,
question in the chat. Oh.
Sorry, this was Tony Simon. Yeah, I sent the request for the bibliography. I don't see it in the chat. I don't know how to download it from the chat.
Oh,
Can we like get an email or something to
Sure.
get the bibliography?
I'm
Okay,
going to
thank
put my email in the chat. If you can email me, I'll reply to you.
oh, see that?
Perfect.
That's
Thank
why
you.
we have this lady helping us.
And if anyone
Awesome.
needs any of the other documents, just please go ahead and email me and I'm more than happy to share them.
Okay.
Paul did have a question in the chat. It says, hi,
Oh, and
Father.
I see
Yeah.
a real interesting question that we need to talk about. But go ahead, Paul.
It says, I was baptized and confirmed in the Chaldean church.
Yeah.
Was that the city in central Iraq you mentioned, Baghdad or Mosul?
Yes, the Chaldean church, same as I was talking about. Yes. Who's doing this question? Is it Paul?
Paul Tello.
Paul, is your father from that area of the Middle East? Or your grandfather?
Paul, if you would like to answer the question, you can unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. Yes. Hi, Father. Sorry. Yes, both my parents and my family are from Baghdad. So they were, raised in the Chaldean church. And then
Yeah.
I was born in the US. I was born in Michigan, but in a Chaldean church there. So I just wondered, I thought you had mentioned, you said a city in Iraq that's modern day Iraq. So I didn't know if that was.
Yeah, Zugma, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Zugma's a different thing. Go ahead. I apologize, Paul. No, the Chaldean church is your church. If your
Yes.
father, here's how it goes. Here's how it's been traditionally. If
Yes.
your father is a Catholic of a certain tradition,
Right.
okay, or church,
Yes.
you are what he was.
He was, yes.
So if he's Chaldean, you are too, Chaldean, right?
That's right.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes,
Any-
that's correct. Yeah. But I'm in, there's not really any Chaldean churches around. So that's kind of why I've gravitated towards
No.
the
No,
Mary-
actually, where do you live?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. I
Yeah.
served in Flint for over
Yeah.
6 years, and there is a large community of. Oh, I thought you said you were in Michigan. I'm sorry, but
Oh,
anyway, there's
I
a
was
large communities of Chaldeans in the Detroit area, and many of them joined Our Lady of Lebanon Church in Flint, Michigan. But yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Missouri.
Yes.
I don't know. I assume you've investigated that.
Yeah, that's that. There's some in also California and San Diego,
Yeah,
Los Angeles, I think.
yeah,
and
they
that-
have a famous bishop who's a Chaldean bishop,
Yes, absolutely. So,
Sacco, I think.
Saco, yes, that's right. That's right. But
Where is the nearest Chaldean church? Do you know?
to me,
Yeah, to you.
there is one I went to pharmacy school in Chicago, so there is one, I think it's a suburb of Chicago. I think it's Skokie, Illinois.
Okay.
I only, I probably should have gone more when I was there, but I went one time. But yeah, there is a Chaldean church there. There might be more than one, but that's probably going to be the closest one to me.
It's a pretty big commute, isn't it, each week?
Yeah, it would be.
Although we have people in the Twin Cities that drive 35 to 40 minutes to come to St. Mary's or to Holy Family, really dedicated. And that's true of other places too.
Absolutely.
Be kind of neat if somehow you could get in touch with them. But
yeah.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks, Paul, for your comments. Good
Oh,
comments.
thank you for answering my question.
Sure. I think I saw another one, unless Yvette. Oh, there was one from St. George Maronite Church. I don't know where that is.
That's in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we definitely have a church there.
And then Kevin also asked, were any popes in history? Oh, sorry. Father Aaron says Uniontown. We also have one in San Antonio. That's why. Kevin asked, were any popes in history from the Eastern Church traditions?
Yes. Several. I cannot name them right now. I have to Google it. But the answer is yes. Which is really a very interesting question. Let me just kind of expound on that for a moment. This is quite an old book, but it's one of the most famous, and I love it. Shoes of the Fisherman. Anybody know that book? Yeah, isn't that a fascinating book? So the person involved, a bishop involved in Siberia, becomes elected pope. And it's very interesting. The book is very interesting. It really influenced me a lot for a number of reasons. But I need to tell you, I often thought, what do you have to do with canon law for that to happen? Someone from the Eastern Church becoming the Pope of the whole church. I don't know. I'm not a canonist, but it's a wonderful story. Not to mention the fact that the major character is Anthony Quinn, who was a wonderful actor. Yeah. What else? Anything else? I'm enjoying your questions an awful lot. I'm reluctant to go into the next section because I've kept you long enough. And I wanted to leave enough time for questions, but Subdeacon Tony.
Yes, I did have a question on all of the Eastern churches that you had on that chart before, and it showed the Maronite was the only one that had never left.
Yes.
Did the entire Orthodox church in each of those churches return, or did some of it split off and so there's still an Orthodox portion?
Good question. Good question. No, not all have returned. And that's why I made the point about ecumenism, that one of the jobs of the Eastern Catholic churches is to talk to their brothers and sisters and in formal dialogue to encourage them to see what advantage there might be in reconciliation. But if everybody returned, then we wouldn't have any Orthodox churches anymore, would we? They'd all be Eastern Catholic.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
I don't mean to belittle your question, but think of that logically, you know?
No, I agree. And it would just be interesting if we had Maronite Orthodox and Maronite Catholics. That would be really something.
Yeah, you know what I always
I can't imagine it.
No, I always tell people saying Maronite Orthodox is an oxymoron. Do you know what that, does everybody know what that word is? Yeah. It's an inherent contradiction. But there's something else I probably should say too. The closest Orthodox church to us is the Syriac Orthodox Church, but it's not our equivalent. They're not our equivalent. Because in history, the Maronite Church, which was West Syriac, Antiochene, developed its own right. And that's interesting. So, but when we look at all the other Eastern churches, especially the Syrian churches, that's the closest one. You look at their liturgy, the terms that they use, the prayers that they use, you'd think they were praying in a Maronite way. Or we sometimes say, are we praying in the Syriac Orthodox way? No, we have our own particular liturgy. It's quite beautiful. And there's some interesting differences too. And it's so significant that we are considered a separate, we use a separate rite than the other two. Tony, you got another question? Your hand is up.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, I have a question for the group. I did a reflection question last time. Did the presentation for you tonight, A, thoroughly confuse you and you'll never come back next week? Or did it help you see better the complexity of the church and part of its history, but especially the ecclesiology and the complexity? Did it help? Was it new? I must have answered all your questions. Did the diagrams help? Oh, Craig said it helped. Well, Craig wrote help, so I don't know if he needs help. I assume you meant it helped. How about any of the other ones? You know, I got to tell you, when I was a seminarian a long, long time ago, and I entered seminary, as you heard last week, over 50 years ago, we had not yet begun to appreciate and investigate our own tradition. And quite frankly, I remember, well, we used to go to a Heffley and there were Melkites there, or sometimes there was a stray Orthodox there. But what I did notice too was interesting, that of the different between Orthodox Catholics, okay, and the different rites, people really mixed. It was really quite nice, you know, but I didn't know what I tried to teach you tonight. I want to put it to you that way. So I was hoping it helped. What else?
Yeah,
Observations.
Put in the chat, it really helped me see the diversity in the church and the number of traditions there are.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Now, my question to you is, what do we do about all those other people who aren't as educated as you now? What do we do? How do we help them to see? What could you do? What could your priests, your deacons, what could your catechists do in your communities? Sorry, you can't see the expressions on my face tonight, Yvette. I don't know what happened here, but my eyebrows go up and down when I ask these questions.
Samar says invite them to church.
Absolutely. If you are close enough to any Eastern church, by all means you should, but especially if you're close to a Maronite church. Sometimes if you're even like 20 minutes by expressway or half hour, it's worth it. It really is worth it. You have no idea when I invite my friends to come to worship to our churches, they all say to me, oh my gosh, what a beautiful liturgy and how reverent it is. And you guys really know how to pray. And boy, and you love Jesus. And by the way, they almost always say, and you love Mary too. We'll get into that later, but so often the Blessed Mother is in the Eastern liturgies in general in the Maronite Church. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, just kind of answering the question you just asked about what can we do.
Yeah.
I am not Maronite. I'm Latin, but we attend.
You'll see the light. You'll see the light someday.
Well, I'm discerning that. So, you know, we really enjoy attending St. Raymond's in St. Louis.
Oh yeah.
And I've been connected. My family's been connected with the Maronite Church for 14 years now. We
Wow.
started in Texas,
Wow.
attending in Louisville. But
Wow.
anyway, over the years, you know, my love for the church has grown, our love, and I have had many opportunities to just share with people, hey, we attend the Maronite Church, and they're kind of like, I thought you were Catholic. And I say, yeah, actually, let me talk about that. And I take the opportunity to explain to them. And I don't know that I've ever met anyone who I've told that to, except for maybe a priest or someone who's well educated in the faith that knows what I'm talking about. So it really, almost every conversation I've had with people has been an opportunity to educate someone on the universality of the faith. And
Praise
just
God. Praise
so
God.
I say
Good
take
for-
the opportunities.
Good for you. Here's a line I often use too. You might want to do this. If you're talking to a Catholic of another rite, not only Latin, just tell them you're at least as Catholic as I am. Then they have to stop and think, oh, wait, what did he mean by that? But I mean it literally. Yeah, good, very good. Yeah, the community in St. Louis has been vibrant for a long time. And Bishop Shaheen, God rest his soul, did so much good work there, you know, even to the point of bringing two churches to one. You remember that with St. Raymond's and another, and now it's just one. And then now it's the cathedral, co-cathedral anyway. Did a lot of good work. Subdeacon Tony.
Yeah, I just have to say, so Mark's sons are the best servers we've had at St. Raymond's in a long, long time. They're there every Sunday and they do a great job.
Well, that's a wonderful compliment. But you know what people say formerly, especially old folks like me, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And those things don't happen without the encouragement of faithful parents. Really, really. And any of you in this tonight, I see John Corey. I don't want to embarrass him, but he's the organizer and coordinator for the MYO in Holy Family Church, Maronite Youth Organization. He does such a wonderful job with young people. And anyone else here who does that, our example is really important. What else?
Okay, Father Tony, now that you called me out. No, I just wanted to just add to what Mark was saying, because I grew up with one foot in the Latin rite and one foot in the Maronite rite.
Yeah.
I went to Latin grade school. I went to Latin Catholic high school, and kind of rediscovered the Maronite rite later. I mean, I received my sacraments of initiation in the Maronite rite, and we went on occasion, but I spent a good part of my life going to Latin church.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know, when I rediscovered it a couple times, once as a teenager and then once as an adult. But just, you know, what struck me was the liturgy, right? And you know, the emphasis on God's mercy and our need for it. That sort of permeates our liturgy, that it's just not as pronounced or prevalent in in the Latin Rite, especially I guess the Novus Ordo, the English Mass.
Well, let me say this. The Eastern churches never fail to keep saying, Lord, have mercy, do we? So when we come to that part, it's one of the characteristics of Eastern thought, but not absent from authentic Latin tradition. Of course.
Sure.
I want to tell you a real quick story. It's funny, but I hope you'll all take it in the right way. One day, a lady accosted me, entered a discussion with me. And she said, Father, I really miss the Latin in the Latin liturgy. And I said, oh, you did? You do? Talk to me about that. She says to me, yeah, Kyrie eleison. Isn't it? Only two people are smiling that I can see. And I saw this bubble that, burst over, that was over her head with the thing. And I burst her bubble. Kyrie eleison is Greek. She missed the Latin in the liturgy and she quoted the Greek. We have to be careful, what we learn about our liturgies and do it. But God knows the Eastern churches never get tired of Kyrie eleison. Who wants to sing it? It's really true. But yeah, it just there's so much there. I said this at the beginning. I'm going to say it again. I do not disparage the Latin tradition. I do not disparage it. I've gone to some very beautiful Latin liturgies, but it's not my tradition. My tradition is Antiochene Syriac Maronite, and that's how I'm trying to live my life. And so that's why we're doing what we're doing tonight. So I really do appreciate your comments, and Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. All right. What else?
We had another comment. Samara puts dialogue with ecumenism, Orthodox, for example,
Okay.
and show them the beauty of the Catholic Church.
Oh, is that a question or a statement?
A statement.
And I want to understand the statement. Say it again, please.
Dialogue. It was about how to basically your question about bringing or having people know about the different rites. It's dialogue with ecumenism, Orthodox, for example, and show them the beauty of the Catholic Church.
I couldn't agree more. That's the heart of ecumenism, And I think that's why so many of the Orthodox churches over the centuries, there are many, many reasons, and political is one of them, protection of the king, and all. But I do believe that there is an inherent beauty that exists in the Catholic expression that doesn't necessarily happen all the time in the Orthodox tradition. But believe me, I have many, many Orthodox friends. I've worked with them, and I've seen a lot of nice comings over the river from Ctesiphon to Seleucia. Yeah, it's beautiful, and we need to do it. Good comment. What else?
Ben writes, for me, I love the Maronite liturgy because there's a strong emphasis on adoration for who God is, rather than asking for things from God.
Oh my gosh.
I see the East as a liturgy of praise, while the West emphasizes what God does for us. Both are important.
Well, both are important, but it's not absent in the West, not absent. If you look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, for example, and in my book where I talk about prayer, 4 different kinds of prayer. I hope I can say them now. Sometimes adoration, intercession. Oh my gosh. See, I told you I couldn't remember the other four, but pray, adoration and praise, But so, and you can find it in the catechism, but I guess the point is that very, very true that, look, here's my other deal. I think the first duty of a Christian is to praise God. That's the first duty. And then secondly, where do we find the opportunities to praise God? Personally, in my prayer life, and secondly, in the liturgy, and which is for me, the Maronite liturgy, but holy cow. Oh, and then, John, your comment about Lord have mercy and worthiness. We have a long prayer. We'll talk about it in the last segment, but worthy and unworthy. How many times do we say that in the Maronite liturgy? For example, make us worthy to blah, 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 da, 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 da. May we be worthy to da, 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 da. And the problem, of course, is, which is why I wrote Captivated, we never take the prayers that we have and sit there and live with them and actually pray them. Because while we're doing it, while we're worshiping, we don't have time to sit back and think about it. We need to pull those out. But worship is central to what we do, central to what we do. And praise is central to worship. Okay. What else? Yep. Well, 5 to 9. You've been so wonderful. And you didn't, I only saw 55 people leave the chat during, no.
Well, before we leave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just one comment about sharing what our own experience of the Maronite Church with others.
Oh, sure.
This summer I was in a class in Montana, and there was no Maronite church there. I'm Roman Catholic as well, but at any rate, so I went to the Greek Orthodox Church in the morning, and I went to the Roman Catholic Church in the evening so I could receive the Eucharist on Sundays. And it was a wonderful experience for them to have a Roman Catholic priest praying with them
Oh,
in
sure.
the morning. And
Sure.
the pastor there was just absolutely wonderful. We got to be very good friends and went out for coffee a couple of times and just shared, and I shared with him my own experience. The church is one because God is one.
Yeah.
And the differences that exist are created by human beings, not by God. So, and he was certainly in agreement with me on that.
Thank you for that very good comment. I have a question for you. Doesn't it break your heart that you can't receive communion with them? It does mine too. But as a result of the council and our dialogues, we can give the Orthodox communion, but they will not let us yet. We got to work on it. Yeah, but it breaks my heart too, doesn't it? Good. Thank you, Gilbert. Anybody else? Okay. Yvette, I think it's time for us to say bye. Well, those of you in California have some time yet. All right. Thanks for being here. Meet you again next week. Come on back. God bless you. See you.
Good night.
Good night.